Hi everybody, welcome to our latest video, which is a seller's guide. It is going to consider what has changed in the seller's market, but it is based around sound principles when you're approaching any sale of a business. So there are a few tweaks that have happened in a kind of post-corona environment, but actually the process remains broadly the same. Ross and I, this is based around a document Ross and I actually wrote about 4 months ago, and we're going to release over the next couple of weeks. And when we were reviewing it and adding stuff in, what we discovered is actually the principles haven't changed. What's changed is the type of deal you might get. So we'll go into more detail as we work through, but it's going to be a fairly short video. The seller's guide will be out over the next couple of weeks, and if you've got any questions afterwards, please give Ross or me an email and we can set up a call to go through in more detail. So Ross is going to take us away with the first section, which its title is "If you have to do a deal, you're not going to get a great deal." So Ross, over to you.
Yeah, there's the behavioural psychology that kind of underpins that, and we actually see it implemented in any kind of number of areas. You know, if you want to buy a new house to live in, often you fall in love with the house, and therefore you end up probably paying a little bit more than you otherwise would. But I think it's worth kind of emphasising that we don't necessarily believe that you have to sell at this point in time. Dan's introduction there is quite pertinent because I think it'd be quite natural to feel a bit tired about the process that's gone on and think, oh, you know what, I'll just kind of exit now and you know, kind of cash in whatever I can. But I think intrinsically we don't believe that. Fundamentally, COVID and the shutdown has been a catalyst. It hasn't changed any major rules as far as we're concerned about how to run a business properly and creating competitive advantages and having proper marketing systems and proper financial control. Actually, all those parts are still very consistent. And okay, yes, it's changed things, but actually from a macro level, businesses are still businesses. And we know dentistry is not going to disappear. Its revenues may well reduce compared to last year, but it's grown by something like 90% over the last decade. So there's still a healthy amount of patients that still want what dentists provide. So I guess that's my kind of caveat before we kind of launch into any kind of elements of a selling guide, that in the best possible way, we want you to have options so that selling is genuinely an option and not a requirement. Because as Dan was alluding to, if you have to do a deal, you can be absolutely sure there's going to be a pretty poor outcome for you there. The corporates are still acquiring, but they're not stupid, and they will intrinsically know whether the type of offer that you can cope with will be better or worse than what it maybe was pre-shutdown. So there's many layers that we can kind of dive into with that, but I think it's my philosophy with this is always, where possible, to stack the deck in your favor. And you may want to sell and you may plan to sell, but you should always be prepared to carry on.
Yeah, so I think the kind of mantra that we came up with that is planning to sell, hoping to sell, but not committing to the sale. So what we see time and time again is actually someone get the initial sale price and they almost start deciding how to spend it and check out from the business. Now, it's really a starting point. So obviously, if you put yourself in the position of the acquirer, they want to get the revenue for as cheap a possible price. So if they can take little nibbles, if your revenue kind of continues to dip, so the sales that we're looking on now, obviously they're kind of factoring in that actually some of the valuations are quite good, but a big factor is how quickly have you got back to your previous revenue.
So we'd kind of embellish that, Dan. We have got clients who are looking to sell at this point in time and are actively taking it to market, and we do endorse that.
Yeah, probably an interesting kind of just insight is actually the practices that are selling are the ones that have gone back to work hardest, and some are already at 100% of pre-COVID revenues, because they're way more incentivized in their minds to get the best possible price in the exit. And what it does for them is it gives them leverage. So when the purchasers come in and try and do from the purchaser's point of view, there's nothing kind of nasty about it, but they want the best possible deal. So if they suddenly say, yeah, okay, we'll give you that price, but what we'd like to do is only give you 50% up front, and then we'll maybe over 5 years give you the other 50, because they're seeing what's possible. You need to have leverage to counter that. And basically, if you kind of check out and go, great, I'm going to get a quick. I've got the sale price. It's in my bank, and I'm going to buy a nice little boat, and I'm going to spend my life living kind of relaxing under the sun. You're definitely going to get a bad deal, and we're actually seeing that as well. So we're seeing practices with kind of £1 million plus of revenue that have checked out, don't want to relaunch their business in post-corona, and are kind of accepting 40% of what the revenue is, which is unheard of before.
Or shutting down completely, actually.
Yeah, that's for the first time. We're now kind of looking at it saying, actually, it might be a better option for you to just dissolve your limited company and walk away. So there are new rule changes, but it's all based around the fact that the better your business is performing at the point of sale, the best possible deal you can get.
Well, there's no better leverage than to be able to say, yeah, no thanks, I'll just carry on.
Yeah. So that's probably the biggest thing I'd like people to understand and to take away, that actually it should almost be the hardest you've ever worked in making the business a success as you're going through the sale, because otherwise you have zero leverage. And we've seen it time and time again that the deal rarely gets any better as you're going through due diligence, because why would it? But if you're in a strong position and they've got a point that you disagree with, you can say, great, we'll just keep driving the business forward. The next bit we're looking forward to, which is obviously related, is priming the business for sale. So we're going to focus mainly. So we always think you should be growing your organisation, but this section we're kind of looking a bit more at the profitability side of it. So Ross, do you want to kind of give us some an outline of that?
Yeah, I mean, again, this comes back to first principles, that we do still believe there's opportunity to prime a business for sale, even in this marketplace. Okay, yes, it will be harder, and actually, if you do genuinely believe and want to do it, it might defer the sale timeline, but that's kind of okay as well. But profitability is actually, there's two component parts to profitability. Actually, as I see it, there's the first layer actually is the layer that a lot of people kind of overlook, is having the systems and the infrastructure in place to prove that the profit is what you said it was. To take one particular example, but it's not the only example. Having cloud-based bookkeeping is just a great tool to have, because the price might be calculated, the profit and the price might be calculated as X pounds, £200,000. Well, actually, again, through the due diligence phase, you want to have just solid defences to any kind of assertions that might be levied at you. So it's often overlooked, but making sure you've got really good financial systems and resources in the practice as well, whether that's a practice manager or a bookkeeper that is diligently keeping your records up to date. Not very exciting, I kind of get that, but it becomes exciting when you multiply your profit by 7 or 8 times in a sale, and it's possibly kind of bringing your price downwards. And to be honest, again, basic business principles, you should have that in place already, because why wouldn't you be interested in your profitability? The second part is actually kind of optimizing the profitability and making active changes to improve profitability. Again, I think there's often kind of a certain amount of slackness, probably not conscious, but it can be quite comfortable when revenues are okay, that it's not necessarily a focus point. So generally speaking, when we're looking at appraising a practice, there'll probably be somewhere between 5 and 8% profitability that's just been kind of lost because it hasn't been high enough up the radar for attention. But again, there's no reasons at this moment not to kind of forage around for every last percentage point. And there's any number of tools and tricks that we can help with to identify those areas, including benchmarking against the industry and everything like that. But I'll admit it's it hasn't been a focal point pre-shutdown, but if someone could give you 5 or 8 percentage points at this point in time, I'm sure you would take them, wouldn't you?
Mm. I think it's really the only time Ross gets a real opportunity to roll up his sleeves and work on the profitability of the organisation is in the case of a sale. So, pre-COVID, we're seeing up to kind of 10 times profit multiples. So it's quite easy to say, hey, if we find £10,000, that's an extra £100,000 in your pocket in a sale. So it was a much more compelling argument, but you might have seen
too late,
yeah. The equation for profit in dental practices historically was basically profit equal to income. So if you were just looking to have a successful dental practice, it was only about growth, or you could get away with it only being about growth. So it was a very easy lever to pull on. I think it's still going to be out there, but we're all going to have to get slightly more sophisticated in how we see our financial model of the organisation.
All of that's great if income is steadily increasing, but we don't have that environment anymore. Or most practices certainly won't.
It's probably the thing you'll all be quite familiar with is associates percentages. So quite often, to encourage a principal to have the awkward conversation with their team members to reduce them from 50% to 45 or 40%, we'd have to have a very clear incentive behind it. So, strangely enough, if we're saying, actually, if you reduce the percentage, that'll give you an extra £20,000 a year profit, it wasn't as compelling as saying, oh, in a sale, that'll give you £200,000. So that would always force the awkward conversation. What we're saying is now it's definitely not just about associate pay rate. It's about any number of things. But as we're all kind of getting slightly more figuring out how we're going to survive, a big thing is businesses, dental practices will run incredibly slackly. Another change we're actually seeing is the purchasers are putting a value on the operations of the practice, which is not something we've seen before. In kind of very broad terms, they were just looking to buy revenue and profit. And that's how the valuation worked. Now they're actually interested in the operations, how well it runs. And that's kind of one of the reasons why they're so keen to see how quickly you get back to your revenue and the measures you put in place. So there are things changing. And I'd say it's a positive change. It's a good thing. Good business practice should get you a better sale price, and it's certainly happening now. And just to go back to a point Ross was making before about he kind of played it down and said it's quite dull. You just need good financial reporting in place. It's a lot of practices don't have it, and if you're not able, if you think the due diligence phase is actually a conversation, if you haven't got the arsenal to actually have a good conversation and to produce counterpoints to the purchasers, I guarantee you're going to lose money in the sale. So we think you should have good financial reporting anyway, because we don't really know how you run a business without it. But in a sale, it's so important, or you will just there'll be kind of tens of thousands of pounds leaking away all over the place that you don't have a counter argument for. So yeah, very important. The next thing we wanted to talk about was doing the deal. So Ross.
Yeah, I think, our deep-rooted philosophy in this area actually was a major driving force behind doing this webinar, behind us writing the seller's guide that will shortly be out as well. But for me, it's actually personally so kind of disheartening when you see a sale not carried out in a way that is not as optimal as it possibly could be, and that only translates to loss of pound notes for the seller. And the weird kind of irony about it is that often the seller doesn't know what they lose, but it's just so emotionally draining for us to be invited in halfway through the process, for example, that we want to be right at the front of the queue. We want to be right there early in the decision-making process with you. because we genuinely can kind of steer people in the right direction and avoid them making kind of catastrophic errors. You know, a classic one is you know, simply to go with the first offer, or the first approach, perhaps from a corporate, for example. You know, it does happen, and you know, I know why it does, and I know why it does happen. You know, it's probably quite flattering getting an approach from a large corporate saying, you know, we genuinely would kind of love your practice. We think you'd be a great fit. You know, come on out and you know, we'll have a little bite to eat and we talk about it. But you know, what we see from our macro position of all the transactions that go on and everything that happens in the industry is that you'll end up getting a worse deal. Just because it's fairly natural. You know, you're probably hard worked for sale price. A bit of it is going into the pockets of someone else. So there's so many things you can kind of do wrong. And why would you know any different? It's probably the only time you sold a practice. So we want to kind of help everyone essentially as much as we can. We want to educate everyone. We want to let them know and help them peek behind the curtain as to what happens. Because there's a way that you can kind of conduct a sale in the right way, and what we don't want to do. My analogy, I suppose, is running a 100-meter race. When you run a 100-meter sprint race, actually, one of the techniques they say is to plan to sprint 110 meters, because you want to be sprinting for the entire length of that race, including when you cross the finishing line. So what we don't want is for you to kind of ease off at the final hurdle when you've worked for 20 years perhaps in your practice, and you know, that final kind of 5 or 10 meters, you step, you trip, you stumble, you end up crawling across the finishing line. It's, you know, and we do see it. It's fairly visible to us how things could have been done differently. I think there's a case study on a website which shows there was £200,000 which you managed to kind of catch just in time. One particular aspect. So it's a reason why we're producing the guide. We want to offer anyone who wants one after seeing this or reading any of our material. We want to offer a free consultation. We've constructed a dedicated sale appraisal to help you consider whether strategically it's right for you. Essentially, we want to share as much as we possibly can, because we know dentistry is still a very healthy industry for people who want to buy in it. There's plenty of associates who still want to buy. There's plenty of institutional investors who still want to get into dentistry despite everything that's going on. So yeah, it's one bit that we wanted to share. There's different formats we can do it with. Pick up the phone, drop us an email, can have a free consultation. We can have a more dedicated appraisal. There's sale programs we also run with people as well to help them lift the value of their business.
Mm-hmm. Very good. So Ross, just as a final point, and you kind of touched upon it there, but I don't know if it was fully explicit. How important is understanding the tax position on a sale?
Well, it depends if you want to leak tens or hundreds of thousands of pounds, because it can happen.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think the only final thing I'd add is, obviously, I think, we're probably the best position to advise on it by the nature of our business, that we're not just accountants. We've got a view on the entire market and can act objectively to get you the best deal for your personal situation. Whereas if you kind of go to someone else, they have their own agendas to work with it. So I would say definitely speak to us at the very least, and hopefully we can give you some context on how to view the situation. But definitely there's still opportunities to sell. Yet the deals look a bit strange, but there's still a process to follow to get the best possible deal given the market context. So please get in contact. Thanks very much. And hopefully speak soon. Cheers.